So if I'm like humming or snapping or whistling or something like that, just tell me to stop.
Okay. All right. Well, here we are.
Here we are.
Humming and whistling away, drinking tea, getting ready to talk about George Orwell's classic novel, 1984. Yeah, we both have different cover copies.
Yeah, it's the same edition, but it's a different cover.
Is
authorized
it?
edition,
Authorized
75th.
75th year?
Yeah.
So, welcome to Resistance Reads. This is our inaugural episode. We are talking about George Orwell's 1984. And the purpose of this podcast is to think about power and resistance through literature. And given the current political moment, I really thought that 1984 was a good place to start. And Matt here had not read 1984 until recently. And I got to read it first in high school, and then I read it again in my early 20s. Ironically, when I was working at a courthouse, I was listening to audiobook as I was filing.
Wow.
I was filing court files. And
that must have been a surreal experience to deal with documents, like very important documents.
Yeah.
While reading a book about totalitarianism from the perspective of a propagandist.
Well, I'm sitting here reading all these misdemeanors, of crimes, people smoking weed, and I'm just thinking to myself, because that was like the most common one. It was like failure to appear smoking weed were like the most common misdemeanors in the courthouse at that particular time. So,
That's funny. That's really funny. I love that. That must have been a surreal experience.
Yeah. So how we're going to approach this is we're going to kind of do it in 4 parts. And so part 1 is a real brief, quick summary. This is gonna, of course, have some degree of spoilers. However, it's not really gonna get into the nuance of the book. If you want the nuance, you got to read the damn thing, right?
So good. Read it.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so mind-blowing. If you've never read it and you've just heard like people talking about things being Big Brother or Orwellian, more reason to read it. More reason to read it, in fact, because in some cases, them using those terms are actually Orwellian themselves. So we're in summaries part 1. Then we're going to talk about cultural relevance, where these kinds of things have appeared, influenced ideas, various other things. Then we're going to talk about some of the key issues, key passages. And then lastly, like what's the staying power, or what if it's a newer novel, because we're going to cover a wide range of stuff. We'll talk about like what are potential things that are like big takeaways that may stand the test of time. Easier when you have a classic novel like 1984 to talk about standing the test of time, because now 75th year edition, right? I mean, was that last year or this year?
Actually, I'll look it up.
80. Well, came out in 48, right? He just reversed the number.
So 2023.
Yeah, so 2023. So this is actually 77 years since this book is published. Like that's like the average lifespan of an American.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's a little over it. I think
a little over it now.
It was for our parents, but not for us.
Yeah, because we suck.
Yeah, because we ate all that avocado toast.
All that avocado toast. A quick summary, 1984. So this is a book about a man named Winston Smith, and interestingly, Winston Smith is a propagandist in the Ministry of Truth. And the Ministry of Truth is kind of this arm of this totalitarian state that constantly edits history. And so as you're kind of walking through Winston Smith's shoes, you see him knowingly alter this text while at the same time hating the party. I mean, he hates them. Very quickly, very early on, he begins to write in a journal or a diary, which is like this profound act of resistance, journaling. So he's going through this kind of day to day, and you get these kind of excerpts of what life is like in this totalitarian state called Oceania. And there are 3 states, right? It's Oceania, it's East Asia, and Eurasia, right? So there's these 3 perpetually warring states, and of course there's kind of this looming question throughout the book: is how much are they actually warring? Are they actually warring, or is it propaganda? Another key thing that happens pretty much right away in the first chapter is called the daily 2-minute hate. And the daily 2-minute hate is where the party of Oceania essentially gets everyone worked up on a daily basis. You got to get everyone to show you images about terrible things and atrocities that the enemy is doing, or the hidden enemy, Goldstein, and I actually was wondering, is that like a veiled anti-Semitism?
I think it's not veiled. I think it's
veiled.
explicit.
It's
He's
explicit.
calling out anti-Semitism.
Yeah. So that's essentially the very beginning. He runs you through exactly what he does to alter these various documents and text, and he gives you like this one moment where he talks about how he had found a piece of truth, like a piece of a true article that had been altered, that these three particular individuals had not committed a crime but had been executed anyway. And so you kind of build up to this, and then the next thing that kind of happens is he meets this hot young thing, right? Like who
a pretty fit girl. Yeah,
she's pretty good looking.
Yeah.
She's young. He's older. He constantly mentions that he's like flabby and he's got varicose veins and he's in his mid to late 30s.
He's tormented by those varicose veins.
He's
in his
tormented.
ankle,
The ulcer. He talks about them all the time. They itch all the time, and he knew if he scratched it, which I think is obviously like a metaphor for how he's feeling about these whole thoughts of questioning the party line and various things. So he meets her, and at first he hates her because he thinks that she is one of the Thought Police, which is this organization that like really watches the population to make sure that people are not committing thought crime, that they're not deviating from the party narratives, that they're not deviants that could bring about an end to the social order. And so, and then to add on to this, of course, he has the Telescreen. And the Telescreen is, what else is there to say? But it's like
your
social
phone.
media. It's your phone. It's this screen that can transmit information both ways. And he's writing this in 1948.
It's pretty impressive.
It's pretty impressive. Some of it's predictive.
We had televisions back then, but we didn't have... I think people were paranoid about them sending signals back to wherever they came from, but I don't think that actually existed.
No. At that point, they didn't have the technology to record and capture. They didn't even have synchronous sound yet. They don't have synchronous sound in filming until the 1960s. So... I only know that because when I was doing anthropological research, they were talking about having to carry these. To do anthropology documentaries, they had to carry these big old audio recorders with the cameras all the way to the 1960s.
Yeah, of course.
Into the middle of the jungle in the Amazon or the Arctic up with the Inuit or various other things.
Heroic.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's what they say is it's always you always see the person on camera and you think they're doing these heroic things, but you never think about what the cameraman has to do with the camera, right? But I digress here. So the telescreens are constantly on, constantly watching. Every morning he gets a wake-up call, and he has to do exercises with his particular group, his particular like class status.
Yeah,
I believe it was
an age range. I think
an age range. Yeah. Right, and then if he's not doing it, that someone on the TV will notice and yell at him,
which actually
does happen to him. They notice and yell at him. So it's kind of a showing you how the party is very much watching. And then he has kind of this brief encounter with this guy O'Brien, and he starts to think that this O'Brien character maybe is like him and hates the party. And then
did you think that he was a little attracted to O'Brien too? He seemed to have a crush on O'Brien pretty hard.
He did.
More than Julia, even.
Yeah, in some ways there was almost this sexual tension between him. Like almost this homoeroticism between the two of them, the way he looks in his eyes. Because then, Julia, not long after he meets O'Brien, in passing and thinks maybe he's got a kindred spirit, Julia passes him a note, and the note says, "I love you."
Yeah.
And so then they kind of start arranging these kind of secret meetings that lead to like this like little hidden apartment that's above the...
Mr. Charrington's shop.
Charrington's shop. And so it's like the proles, the lower class are not said to be as monitored as much. They're kind of just free to do whatever they want. And one point, Winston says, these guys, they're the real humans. Like, they're free to do whatever they want. But of course, they're overworked. They have very little material possessions. So they have oppression of a different kind.
Deep poverty.
Deep poverty. They live in deep poverty, so you don't need to control them because they're in such a constant state of worry and fear. So they're in hard work that they're so distracted. Sounds familiar. So anyway, they have this kind of love affair, and one important point about this book is sex for pleasure is forbidden. And there's not laws in this totalitarian government. Their concern is not kind of the external. Sure, you can do a crime and be executed for it, but what they're most concerned with is this thought crime.
Yeah,
this deviation from the party line.
Oh, that's true. They're most interested in controlling the way people.
Right. That's the big thing, and that's where they later on say that was the failure of the Stalinists and the Nazis was the inability to control the way that people thought. Yeah. And they also mentioned that technology wasn't there yet in those time periods, and now it is, and which again, smartphones, right? Yeah. So anyway, you have this. So you have this kind of love affair, and they both kind of know they're going to get caught. That it's kind of inevitable. Yeah. They know it's like this rebellious act, and that eventually they'll be taken to what is called the Ministry of Love, which is the torture chamber, and forced to confess all their love affair, but also all kinds of other crimes that are made up or whatever.
The slew of crimes that they get them to attribute to themselves is wild.
Yeah, right. When they're
assassinations and bombings and all kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. All kinds of things they had never done and never even thought about. And
right.
So then, after this, as this love affair is going on, you start to see there's another event called Hate Week, and I thought that was a really important thing. And Hate Week is like this whole festival of outrage and outrage pornography, essentially, just getting yourself all worked up and angry for a whole week about the enemy. And the really interesting part about this section was in the middle of Hate Week.
In the middle of the biggest event.
In the middle of the biggest event, they switch who the enemy is.
Yes. And everybody goes with it.
And everyone goes with it. And then there's also this moment where immediately after, everyone has to work hard in the propaganda department. They work 18, 20-hour days to correct all the facts because we've always been at war with this enemy and not with the other.
They switch from Eurasia to East Asia, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like this kind of overwork that they don't even have time to think about the change, that they suddenly become enamored with the change. Right. And it's like 2 solid weeks of work where they do nothing but edit these documents historically.
And then they get a day and a half off after that.
And then they get a day and a half off to do whatever they want. He chooses to go shack up with his
girlfriend.
Young girlfriend, Julia. And then, they go on a little while, and then O'Brien shows up and passes him a note and brings him into confidence and tells him he's a member of the Brotherhood, the Resistance, and they hand him this book, and this book talks about the various principles of the ruling class and diagnoses the whole system.
The Principles of Collective Oligarchy, is that the title of it?
I think that's what it was, right? Yeah, I don't remember the name, but but yeah, so they have the Principles of Collective Oligarchy or whatever it is, and then O'Brien says you have some time, to ponder over this, and then Winston's kind of reading it to Julia.
He needs to read it in 7 days.
He needs to, something like that. Yeah. So he reads the whole thing, and then he's reading it to Julia, and Julia falls asleep. Yeah. She doesn't really seem to care so much about the political structure that's going on. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then it turns out that there was a hidden telescreen in this apartment, and of course they catch them and throw them in prison.
Mr. Charrington was a spy.
Dope
acting. Apparently, he pretended to be 70. He was like 35.
Yeah, right.
The whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
He had dyed his hair gray and all this other stuff. And it turns out he's a member of the Thought Police. He basically knew what Winston was up to the whole time.
He sold him the book, his journal that he wrote in originally.
Right. Yeah. So the journal, the original act of rebellion, and so then they go through the whole interrogation, and they kind of not only force them to kind of confess, but they essentially convince them to love the party again.
Yes,
and then
to betray each other emotionally.
Right, to betray each other emotionally with their greatest fears. With Winston, it's like these rats that are going to be released to eat him alive kind of thing. Julia never tells you because you don't really see her perspective, but they both, confess that they betrayed each other when they finally see each other again. And he's actually let back out into the world. And I think this is very clearly a technique to keep him creating martyrs. They want him to love the party.
Well, they give him a much better job that he doesn't. All he has to do is be on a committee
about commas.
I'm sorry, a subcommittee of a subcommittee where they're discussing where the commas should go or if there should be commas in the Newspeak dictionary.
Right.
And then he just hangs out in a cafe, the Chestnut Tree Cafe, and drinks terrible gin and plays chess all day long.
All day long. But basically he learns to love the party again, and then in the last lines of the book they kill him. So that way shoot him in the back of the head, and he knew it was coming. And what was the last line? It was
pretty good.
It was a great last line. Whoops. It says, "But it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won victory over himself. He loved Big Brother."
Oof.
So okay.
Dark. That book shook me, man. Shook me to my core.
Yeah.
Having never read it, it feels like a playbook at this point. It feels like exactly what the current party in power does. In fact, I think you could say that at the inauguration for the president, there was a collective of oligarchs.
Oh, yeah.
There.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
the only people there with Trump when he was inaugurated were the masters of the technology that rules.
Right. Yeah. And that's certainly something to say. So let's talk relevance, cultural relevance. I mean, you go to the Wikipedia page and there are thousands of entries, and I was gonna pick a few key ones, but I thought, well,
yeah, man,
there's just so many. I just think, I think the biggest piece of relevance for 1984 is the term Orwellian itself, which is the idea of the oppressive government, but also Big Brother. Right. So and you see this all the time in political spheres. Big Brother is watching you, or you'll have a political debate and someone will say, "What do you want, Big Brother? You want Big Brother breathing down your neck?" I mean, it's kind of like it's both the term Orwellian and Big Brother are a way of shutting down dissent and conversation, which is ironic.
Dude, you're definitely onto something there.
It's a way of stopping sincere critique or conversation about cultural systems or systems of power, which in itself is deeply Orwellian.
Yes.
So you'll see these politicians.
The whole point is reinforcing shallow thinking.
Right. So you'll see these politicians get up and they'll be criticizing some policy. They'll accuse it being of socialism, which of course, like English socialism is at the heart of this book. Ingsoc, they call it.
Is the government, is the ruling.
Right. And so, and it's important to note that actually Orwell historically was a socialist and was horrified by what he saw socialism do.
He was a socialist in the kind of like the early part of the 20th century, right? And then he saw the horrors of the National Socialist Party, which is very much not socialist.
Right.
And then also Stalin's rule, which was ostensibly socialist, but became totalitarian.
Right. I mean, the idea of using socialism and communism as these kinds of ideological systems to keep you from criticizing. Well, isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this what you wanted? Like you wanted to have these kind of collectivism kind of approaches, and it does kind of remind me of like this Rousseauian, let's get back to the origins of the hunter-gatherer type approach, which is not actually really what happened anyway. We've been complex political creatures since as long as we've been, probably even before we were modern human. Yeah. So experimenting with different ways of managing civilization or social structures or various whatnot. But I think that's the most probably important takeaway, is this idea that the very concepts used by Orwell are now used by those in power to prevent sincere critique.
The concepts that he was elucidating were then turned on their heads and used to oppress people.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think this is where we should, because we were talking a little before this.
Yeah.
Why do we have high school students read this
Why?
book? Why? If we're I mean, if you think about high school as an institute, in reality, you know, primary and secondary educations are really about getting people to be good citizens.
Yes.
That's really what it's about. Doesn't matter what sort of regime you're talking about, whether that's democratic or socialism or authoritarian or anything. The goal is to get people to be good citizens within a given society. Mm-hmm. So the question is why would we take a book that is so kind of radical?
Yes, possibly the most radical book I've ever read. I've got Chomsky and I got all kinds of things over there, and this thing blew them all out of the fucking water.
Right.
He tells it. He literally tells it like it is. Trump claims to tell it like it is when he, in fact, only speaks in lies, which is so fucking Orwellian.
Yeah.
But 1984, like, scrapes the top 3 layers off of all of that shit and just tells you what they're doing, which is controlling you through hate and fear.
Right.
And keeping you from thinking dangerous thoughts, because that could get you thrown in jail. Like, literally the other day, when people were lighting Tesla things on fire, I was like, I was gonna Google, like, what's the best way to destroy a Tesla charging station? Because I was, like, wondering what people, like, how they were achieving it, you know? But I was afraid to type that into a computer, because I also know that Trump and Elon want to make that an act of terrorism instead of just an act of destruction. Right. You know, that's already a crime, but they wanted to make the punishment for the crime life in prison, essentially. You know, and life in Guantanamo Bay
or Ecuador.
Yeah,
exactly. Ecuador now, right? Our new concentration camps.
Exactly.
Basically.
They are. That's exactly what they are. If you read about those camps, they're putting 80 people in rooms, you know, like meant to hold 20.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was afraid to do that, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, I guess if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, you know.
Don't obey in advance.
Don't obey in advance. Exactly. Exactly. That's what they want. They want to keep you thinking shallow thoughts, and he really tells you how they do that.
Yeah.
In a very succinct way, I would say, in about 30 pages, while Winston's reading the book of Control, you know, that Goldstein ostensibly wrote, but in fact O'Brien actually
wrote it. O'Brien. I forgot to mention that O'Brien is actually like a high member of the ministry. Really, he's like an arbiter of power. Mm-hmm. So
he's basically the in-book manifestation of Big Brother.
Right. Yeah, because you know they bring up the fact is Big Brother a real person like me or you? Big Brother is the party, they say. Yeah. So it's the people who carry out the marching orders.
Yeah, and it's all about like living past yourself. At one point, O'Brien mentions that the only way that a human being can achieve legacy is to become part of a system that carries on forever.
Right.
And that's what they're trying to achieve.
Right.
They're just trying to achieve power, boundless, endless power.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean...
But why do you teach kids... Oh, back to your original point.
Right.
Why teach this in high school? It feels like an inoculation. It feels like they're giving you a little bit of radical thinking at a point when you're predisposed to be radical because you're a teenager. But then they're kind of taking the oomph and the power away because they know that teenagers don't read the books that they're assigned in school. If a grown-up person is in a conversation with someone and they're having a political discourse and you bring up, as that grown-up person, 1984, someone's going to roll their eyes because they're like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, like, sure, right. 1984, Big Brother, right, you know. But it's on the fucking money. It is the most correct political treatise I've ever read. We're basically just dismissing it out of hand because it's a book that we read in high school, like Romeo and Juliet. No one, even Shakespeare nerds don't like Romeo and Juliet because they think it's basic, but it's not. It's a good play. It's just one that most people happen to read in like 8th grade.
And it's like, you know what it's like? It's like you listen to the Beatles.
Yeah.
Okay? And the Beatles are incredible, unique musicians, but it's been on our fucking commercials.
Oh, it's
been on
actually very much like that. You're right.
It's just been on our commercials. It's been in a gajillion movies.
Yeah.
And so the power and the impact of what the Beatles did in their given time, especially once they were like all tripping, and then they came back and changed
did like three masterpieces in a row.
Three masterpieces in a row, and really kind of changed the game in music. It's like we have become so inoculated and so used to hearing those that they almost sound
they're basic now.
They're basic.
If you ask a grown-up person what their favorite band is, and if they say the Beatles, you're definitely going to be like, okay, that's fine. I guess you're a shallow thinker. You're going to think that person's a shallow thinker.
Well, and also too, and I kind of had that experience myself until I saw the film Across the Universe, because I thought that did a good job of kind of capturing what the Beatles were kind of about for their era.
Okay.
To some degree. I just personally love that film.
Sure.
But that kind of woke me up to what the Beatles project was, what they were trying to do, what the uniqueness of their music was. Because I had always heard before, oh, my favorite thing was Beatles. I was like, the Beatles? Okay, that's kind of like whatever. What is interesting about the Beatles? And I think very much that's like this book. It's like we hear that term Orwellian. We hear Big Brother all the time, so we're inoculated. That's a different word.
Yeah.
We're inoculated to this kind of idea of resistance through this book.
Absolutely. The Beatles were my favorite band for like 2 years when I was in high school. And I do listen to them sometimes now, but you're right. I kind of don't take them seriously as a band anymore because one, I know all of their songs.
Yeah.
I've listened to all of their songs so much, but yeah, they don't live rent free in my brain anymore because.
Right. Because things that become norm, things that become a status quo, things that become a part of common usage, it's difficult to use them as a piece of radical literature.
Can't radicalize something that is ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I was saying you can't use something ubiquitous for radical ends, but I think you're onto something there. I like that.
So I think what's awesome is I read it in high school. I then read it again in my early 20s, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, and you're reading it for your first time.
Yes.
And so you kind of getting like this fresh perspective is kind of nice.
Absolutely, because my whole experience up until last week was, I knew about Big Brother. I knew that he was watching you. I wasn't sure if he was a person or an idea. I knew about like Orwellianism, which is really funny because apparently George Orwell wrote so many books and was a journalist, and a lot of the stuff that he wrote wasn't dystopian. He did just write two seminal books about society that have lived past him.
Right.
Animal Farm and this one. And so his name has become a byproduct for the thing he hates, which is actually funny when you think about it, because Dickens is the same way. Dickens fought for social good almost his whole career as a journalist and a writer. And then when you describe something as Dickensian, it connotes like poverty and suffering, which is that's a tangent, but
it's a good point.
Yeah, but other than that, I didn't have any exposure to him. I didn't know that he created memory hole. When you memory hole something, you're purposefully taking this piece of information and throwing it into a little hole that goes into a furnace in your office. It's a hole in your office that goes to a furnace in the bottom of the building that you work in, and it's destroyed forever. And people use that all the time now to describe something that has been unintentionally forgotten. Like, oh man, we just memory holed the pandemic or whatever,
Right.
And I don't think anybody did that, but we memory hold the fact that Trump did nothing. We memory hole the fact. Anyway, that's a whole sideline. But it really shook me because I didn't understand how thoroughly he was describing the mechanisms of totalitarianism. And back to your point about why do we teach this in high school, I do think if I had read it in high school, it wouldn't have had the impact that it did on me because I was already fairly leftist, but I was already quite leftist. But I think I understand. I think all of my anger and like impotent rage at why things are the way they are has been extremely explicitly explained to me in nuance and detail in a way that I understand very clearly the systems that are oppressing me now, and I just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
I also read in conjunction with this because it evokes, whenever I think about V for Vendetta, 1984 is evoked, and I didn't know why before that. The systems that are in place in V for Vendetta are almost identical to the systems that are in place in Oceana. The party is just called the party as well. And it's operated through a panopticon and through doublespeak.
Yeah.
And it's massively corrupt. You get a lot more insight into the actual players in the oppression in V for Vendetta. But what 1984 doesn't do, because it's a prescriptive book, it doesn't tell you how to like take action against the system, because the protagonist in 1984 literally does try to take action.
Right.
And his actions are counteracted at every point along the way.
There's never enough freedom for him. Basically, that the party has set up a nice path for dissenters to kind of fall into a sort of memory hole, because they do memory hole him in the end. They erase people from the records of
they're unalived.
They're unalived. Yeah, they're unalived
or unpersoned. I'm sorry, unalived is the TikTok doublespeak for death.
Right.
Sorry, guys. I said
suicide.
Death or suicide. Yeah.
Well, and that's partly like, because of algorithms and people were trying to avoid.
Well, yeah, but it's the algorithm. The algorithm is creating an incentive for people to come up with their own doublespeak.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which does...
And the un is a key here, because if you, in the appendix...
That's taken from this.
Yes. In the appendix here, there's a whole section on the afterword, and it is about the principles of Newspeak and how... and this is an important point, too, because the control of language is the key of the regime. That is how you maintain that power, is the change in the concepts of language by either burying them in euphemisms or acronyms or various other things. But one of the things they talk about is eliminating a lot of language so that people can't think clearly, so that their way that they speak is consistently shallow.
Yes.
And that is a cornerstone of this book.
Because according to Sapir-Whorf, which you were telling me about before...
Right. So Sapir-Whorf is kind of this social theory. It kind of fell out of favor in the 70s and 80s, but now like neurologists have kind of shown that in fact there is some validity to the fact that that language influences perception, and that's the idea of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It's a linguistic hypothesis, and how much is the question, but it does clearly influence our feelings. Certain emotions, certain ideas are not present cross-culturally.
If you can't describe things to yourself, you can't understand them. That's just kind of how it goes.
And the first stage, Benjamin Sapir wrote his first essay on this in 1924. So it's quite likely that this was a concept that George Orwell was familiar with. And so I'm sure that influenced the idea of Newspeak. But back to the unalive thing, one of the things they talk about is why in the Newspeak approach have two words when you can have one. So the example is instead of having good and bad, you have good and ungood. So you have alive and unalive.
Person and unperson.
Person and unperson. Yeah. So adding un to something, adding a negative power, and he describes this all in the appendix. And I think the appendix is really his way of describing how he's info dumping for you to talk about how he created this idea of Newspeak in a way that's not intrusive to the plot, because you don't have to read the appendix to understand Newspeak, but it adds this additional dimension.
Yes.
Acronyms, and the goal of the book is, so the book takes place in the year 1984, which is the reverse of the year it was published, which is 1948. And he said the idea of the Newspeak is that by 2050, there will be not enough critical language left for the regime to ever die.
Yeah, so if the regime can hold out till 2050, they're basically made in the shade. Absolutely. And they've come up with a very convenient way of silencing dissenters. By having traps laid everywhere for people who are thinking. Which I think that's brilliant. It's evil genius. And having the spies, the little kids. There's a program that's like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts for children in 1984, but it's called the Spies.
Yeah.
The Hitler Youth.
It's like the Hitler Youth.
Where they train the children to inform on their parents if they ever witness their parents performing a thought crime, which is really interesting because Pearson, who's like this big, blustering, jovial, super bought in member of the party that's a colleague of Winston's, his children are terrifying. The one time that you see them,
God.
in the book, they are so fucking sinister. And also, just imagine they're little British children, which is like the scariest type of children you could have.
Yeah.
You know? Children of the Corn and shit.
Yeah. Or Pink Floyd The Wall.
Yeah, exactly. And so you find out later when Winston is captured, and Pearson comes in, and he's like, oh, my daughter got me. She heard me saying in my sleep, down with Big Brother, and I couldn't believe I was saying that. But what a good job I did raising her to inform on me.
I'm happy that she's such a good little member of the party.
Exactly.
Like he's like so, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, this idea of thought crime, this idea that just going against the party even just by thought is too much. And so that's the point, is to create language in such a way that it is impossible to commit thought crime.
Yeah. And really, I think the interesting thing about V for Vendetta is that the only way that the party could be brought down was to accidentally create the seeds of its own destruction in the nameless protagonist, V. And then he does direct action. That's the thing that Winston could never bring himself to do, was to, blow up Parliament or something like that. But to take direct action, to do things that were hard for the party to revise, that if people had seen Big Ben or Parliament, or there's another building in there that I'm not super familiar with London geography, that gets blown up, then you're going to start having people thinking thoughts that the party can't control just because they're a reaction to things that they can actively see in the world.
Right.
Although in 1984, the party actually does have a strategy for that, which is doublethink.
Right.
Which is holding two thoughts in your mind simultaneously, like that building just got blown up, but oh wait, no, it was planned destruction.
It was planned demolition.
It was planned demolition, and I actually did know about that in advance.
Right.
Right.
So, which is like gets into like conspiracy theory and what is conspiracy theory for. Like a lot of conspiracy theory is ironically helps the state maintain its integrity.
Absolutely.
Like the planned demolition of 9/11, for example.
Right. Which is ironic. Ironic. Which is moronic.
Moronic.
No, it was 9/11 happened because of U.S. foreign policy.
Right.
It was, and not future foreign policy like getting oil, but previous foreign policy, which was mucking around in other nations. Installing like figureheads that we could control. It was literally the strategic logic of suicide terrorism.
Yeah, and if you really actually want a book on this, former CIA operative Stephen Cole wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning book called Ghost Wars, and this book talks about the strategies that led to 9/11, such as dropping 19,000 copies of locally translated books of the Quran. They translated it into the local language for anyone who is literate into Afghanistan to make the war for Russia hellacious, and we allied with the Russian, the liberation groups or the rebellion and all this other stuff. And so it essentially blew up in our face because when they needed us most, we abandoned them. Exactly,
because we were being pragmatic and selfish, which is the U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell.
Right.
Also, The Strategic Logic of Suicide Terrorism is a book that I also recommend reading. I do not recall the author's name at the moment, but I read it in school, and it really just explains why there is suicide terrorism, and it's almost always because of occupation.
Yeah, and also another one for more books for you guys. Since you're listening to a podcast about books
about resistance.
About
yeah.
resistance, The Making of a Human Bomb. It's by an anthropologist. I think it's Abu Farah, I think is his name.
Okay.
But he looks at the history of the Palestinian people in regards to the Israeli state. Why do people join Hamas? Why do people... His question is, it's not a question of judgment. He's trying to understand the whys of suicide bombing.
Right.
Not necessarily, whether or not these things are a valid...
I don't think any of those authors were supporting the idea that we should be doing suicide terrorism.
Right.
They're literally just explaining why.
Right, exactly.
In a way that makes a lot more sense than to invade Iraq. We already invaded Iraq. We had done that already.
Yeah,
like that
1990.
that didn't need to happen.
Not to mention all the Cold War stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's so stupid.
Yeah. So okay, we kind of got into cultural relevance. We kind of we veered into the next thing. So some key issues or key passages of the text we kind of want to talk about. And then another thing too is we're going to keep talking here for a little bit. But if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're always happy to field some questions at the end. If we have questions, we'll field them. If we're not, we'll just talk until we're blue in the face because both of us love to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. Some key passages that I really, we kind of already talked about the control of language, but one of the passages, and we have extensive notes, both of us.
Took a lot of notes.
One of the things I really thought was interesting is when you get into essentially the political theory, when Winston is reading the chapters out of these books, and they give you 2 chapters. They don't really give you more than that.
Give you 1 and 3?
1 and 3.
Yeah. And
I don't think you really need much more than that. The 1 is about the control of language, and 3 is about war as a technique. Ever a constant war as a technique for control to prevent abundance in societies.
Yeah, nationalism always rises during wartime. And that's a very convenient method of control.
Absolutely.
Especially if the war is not actually occurring. As far as if you can convince people that war is occurring in it when it's not, that's going to be the most effective means of control, because then you can get the boost in nationalism and you don't have to waste all those materials.
Right.
Necessarily.
Or the wasting of the materials was also a thing of keeping people from having abundance, from having time to think.
Yeah, you can confiscate materials to persuade people that they're at war, and then just keep them subjugated.
Yeah, and then there was one line in there with something like, scarcity makes small privileges seem large.
Ooh, which, God, man.
Right?
That and the whole, chocolate bar bit. Oh,
right, the chocolate bar
so
bit.
sad.
Right, yeah. About having, just a little bit of chocolate makes it feel like, well, I've made all these sacrifices and now I'm a good little boy, and I got my one
treat.
little square of treat, right? But one thing in the 3rd chapter that I really liked is the idea of cultural integrity, and how it was really important for them to never see the enemy as human.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and it's they never see the enemy as human, but never have any kind of cross-cultural exchange, to keep each one totally sterile, to not allow this kind of camaraderie across cultural distance, to keep these ideologies working.
I bumped on that when we meet O'Brien in his apartment, because he has what is described as, I think, a Chinese butler. I thought that was very fascinating, because that means that O'Brien, I guess he's exercising doublethink in that moment too, because he has a manservant who is a different ethnicity, visibly a different ethnicity from him. And it's very strange in the moment when you think that he is allied with Winston, because you're like, how is that possible? How is he keeping this hidden from the party? I guess that's just a very good clue that he's not actually a member of the Brotherhood, has so much power that he can have whoever he wants as his manservant, and even if they're visibly ethnic. Right. And he's
in
England,
and he's like the torturer. He's like the head of the Spanish Inquisition.
Seems like it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, kind of. That's the kind of approach. But back to the cultural integrity idea. This is very much like the word wokeness.
Oh, yeah,
and anti-woke,
right,
and all that stuff nowadays, right? Because you know, if we were to actually sit down, and this is what a lot of the project of leftists and diversity and looking at like critiques of history have been recently, it is looking at how ideologies are created in order to maintain power, because you have to this is a Foucault saying, right? Michel Foucault, the very famous philosopher who wrote the book Discipline and Punish, and talks about how states exercise power and discipline, through surveillance, through all kinds of social control. But every system of power has the same problem. They have to express that power at the lowest possible energetic and economic cost.
Oh, yeah.
And so getting your kids to tell on you is a great example. But then also when you begin to recognize in history that, like, for example, the concept of race was created to divide and conquer the poor, to prevent successful uprisings in the post, American colonial era.
Absolutely.
Specifically with Bacon's Rebellion and other incidents like that, where it kind of codifies, in a legal sense, the concept of blackness and whiteness, and gives additional privileges to poor whites and removes all privileges from poor blacks, so that they become identified as this kind of enemy.
Yeah.
So when you start having people having these conversations, or gender and sexuality, which was very much restricted during the rise of the Industrial Revolution, and all these kinds of new kinds of, quote, perversions start popping up everywhere, so that the good middle class person is essentially sexually and pure, and they have a pure kind of gender, and so you don't get any of these kind of ambiguities, and any sense of ambiguity is kind of a danger, or it's a suspect. So this is where you get like the wokeness, and this is why, like, when you see people say, well, Disney has gotten so woke, and you're like, what are you even talking about?
What is wokeness? What does wokeness evoke in your mind? And I think for most people it evokes like sympathy with queer people and minority people.
Right.
Or I guess queer people are a minority. So sympathy with any minority person and their status. Right. And that is, as far as, Joe Rogan listeners are concerned, like something to scoff at.
Right.
Like, oh my God, can you believe how woke this person is? Just because they don't want to, they don't want the cops to just shoot a black teen walking home from the store.
Right.
God, what about Law and Order though?
Yeah.
It literally is. It's just a signifier of othered status.
Right.
And the term woke arose in black culture, obviously, to as a way. It's like, are you woke? Are you aware of the things that are oppressing you?
Right.
Right. And then, of course, in a classic doublespeak move, the right takes that and then they attach it to a different concept.
Right.
That they want to other.
Yeah.
And there you go,
Yeah.
When Childish Gambino was talking about stay woke, he wasn't talking about stay sympathetic to oppressed peoples. He was talking about stay aware of cops and other dangers.
Right. What is oppressing you?
What is
Be
oppressing
aware of
you?
what is oppressing your identity, your ability to be a fully authentic and realized human.
Yeah.
That's really what the term originally means. But it's also like what they did with Black Lives Matter, right? They say all lives matter, white lives matter, blue lives matter.
Blue lives don't matter, you guys. Don't worry about that shit. They signed up for a dangerous job.
Yeah,
it's dangerous. Okay.
You say, what would you say with minors? What would that be? Black lung lives matter.
I know, right? Come on.
Right, like people working in terrible conditions around the, sweatshop lives matter. We don't even have that. But of course, the Blue Lives Matter is about the maintenance of power and keeping from any sincere critique of that power. Even though, just from a population dynamic standpoint, more white people are killed by cops than any other group.
Absolutely.
It's just proportionally black people take the brunt of it when you look at the actual number.
Yeah, if you're a black person, you're 5 times more likely to be shot by a cop or something like that.
Yeah.
I never get pulled over.
But it is
driving. But if you're a black person, you're gonna get pulled over once a year probably.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's like, so I think it's black men make up 6% of the population and account for 40% of police deaths.
Yeah.
So it's overwhelmingly like disproportional, but it's like, it's also in the interest of white people to be like, this Blue Lives Matter shit is nonsense too.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I want cops to be shot, and we're not saying that we think that miners deserve to get black lung. Like, obviously, mining's such a dangerous job, and like, that's one of the consequences that arises from it. But most people who are miners are doing that because they don't have a lot of other opportunities in their area. The thing that should be addressed is why they're getting black lung. Like, safety is important for everybody, but you just don't hear people going out and talking about that sort of thing. And that's part of the state controlling you too, because the state wants cheap power.
Yeah.
And they've got an expendable population of like Scots-Irish people in Appalachia that they can just like send into the mine and like get that good coal and shit like that, so we can keep burning it to continue powering, you know, electric cars and shit. I don't know. Whatever you call for.
This is kind of what Noam Chomsky terms as worthy victims.
Yeah.
Right? So we have people who are considered disposable, people who are they're like violence, they're worthy of violence because they do something wrong.
Right.
And this is also why you see when a state apparatus violates its own laws that it's set down, like police brutality with George Floyd, which, like, George Floyd is like so terrible that it's extremely difficult to deny how terrible it was.
Right.
But even still, what you see is the conversations that people have immediately is, well, he was a worthy victim of police violence because he wasn't an angel. He wasn't a perfect person.
Oh, yeah,
he was a drug addict. Or like with Michael Brown, he was a thief caught in the middle of an act of, I mean, he was like stealing candy bars or something, like at a gas station. It was something like that.
Stuff I did all the time as a teen.
Right. But because he was shot down, you would immediately have to do a character assassination to reassert that kind of power. Because states, and not just states, by the way, like we were talking about this other day in one of my anthropology class, because we were talking about violence on small-scale societies. Small-scale societies have monopolies of power, too.
Oh, sure.
That the elders and the people in charge will kill or exile people who step out of line in some cases because they have to keep social order.
Yeah, one of the defining characteristics of a state is a monopoly on violence.
Right. Yeah. Right. But it's like at all levels of governance, whether big or small, you see this monopoly on violence where the government, whatever that government likes, even if it's relatively egalitarian, even if it's consensus driven, they still sometimes commit violence to maintain social order.
Absolutely.
Which, and violence and power are not. Violence is about maintenance of power. It's about keeping the social order going. And so when you talk about these kinds of, tough on crime, you see very few politicians, Democrat, Republican, whoever, that are not like tough on crime.
Absolutely. I think that the best way a Democrat can position themselves in a campaign is to say that they're going to be tough on crime because because Democrats are basically just Republicans in a different tie. And, I mean, like, I think the Democratic Party is specifically positioned itself as a counterpoint to the Republican Party, but not to destroy the Republican Party, but to prop it up, because they just choose watered down Republican positions as their counterpoint to a Republican position, not an actual counterpoint. So they're not saying, like, the Republicans are in support of the police shooting black men. Well, what are we going to do? Are we going to get rid of the police? No, we're going to say that you should probably not shoot so many black men. And the way we're going to try to affect that is through a seminar that you're going to go to that'll tell you that black men are people too.
Imagine that.
Wow. So they're not a realistic counterpoint. But they also adopt a tough on crime attitude because they want to reinforce the power structure.
Yeah, and if you want a quick example of this, watch the film 13th. It's actually still free on Netflix.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Or sorry, not Netflix, YouTube. You can
Okay.
just it's about the 13th Amendment. It's really great. It's about the history
I
of.
feel like Kira shows that in her class.
Yeah, I do too sometimes. This actually kind of leads into another point in the discussing of like. In the book, how they're fracturing all these relationships. They're fracturing relationships between husbands and wives.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of outlawing any sexuality for pleasure. They're fracturing.
I mean, that's specifically, they're specifically controlling women's sexuality to control men.
Right.
I mean, they're obviously affecting control over women whilst they're doing that, but it's like, it's a cunning strategy.
Right.
If you repress the sexuality of women, you're going to inherently control the behavior of men.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then they fracture the parent-child relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They fracture friendships.
Yeah.
So the whole point here is that they're creating this kind of fracture to make sure that people feel alone, so you're not organizing, so you don't have community power. And this, of course, like lends itself to like the crack epidemic and the war on drugs and all of this stuff, which you very clearly hear in a recording between Reagan and Nixon about how the whole purpose of that entire project of the war on drugs was to fracture the black community.
Oh my God, is there really a conversation?
There is really a conversation. You can Google Reagan-Nixon conversation about the war on drugs.
That guy was so paranoid he put himself on blast. So
Oh yeah. And so, I mean, they talk about how the point is to stop another civil rights movement, because if you have a fractured community, if you have a constant gang violence, if you can get minorities to fight each other, or if you can get like poor people to fight each other, you have a whole thing. But I wanted to kind of lead into this other piece too here, because we're actually approaching an hour already, believe it or not.
Yeah, you called it.
But like, if you look at, and this is gonna irritate a lot of people, but if you look at the dynamic between MSNBC and Fox News, this is very much that fracture. If you look at how there's all these conversations about how how divided we are and how we live in these kind of algorithmic different media realities, and you also see people who are like, even people who become disaffected with the far right and decide to kind of go back and try to find forgiveness are having a really hard time trying to do that right now, because we've fractured our communities to where people won't speak to each other. To the point where people are like, well, if you're intolerant, if you are ever intolerant at any point in your life, I can never deal with you or talk to you. And so you get these constant purity games on both sides. And the ironic thing is like people like Rachel Maddow, like who are kind of championed as these progressive thinkers, are very much, all they're doing is kind of bitching and looking at the enemy and saying, look at what they're doing on Fox News. Can you believe this? And the point is like hate week.
It absolutely is. Look at what happened to like Naomi Wolf and Candace Owens were both like liberal public figures who like experienced some vitriol from the left in a moment, and hardline shifted to conservative ideology as
or vice president
respite. Sure. I don't buy it. I don't buy that he was ever liberal. That guy was. He went to Ivy League schools. True. Come on, man.
Yeah, but he at least put the mask on. But you're probably right. But but Candace Owens is a great example. Here's this person who's super progressive, working in poor communities, and then like got embarrassed. And because he got embarrassed,
that's what happened to Naomi Wolf too. She got called. Basically, she did sloppy research in one of her books and was doing a feature for the BBC about it, where she was being interviewed, and she mentioned a statistic, and the interviewer happened to know what that statistic actually was indicating. He's like, I'm sorry, you actually got that one like completely backwards. And was just crucified on Twitter for it, on left Twitter for it, because left Twitter loves a dunk just like every other part of Twitter, and never came back. She's like, I mean, she was already a little conspiracy theorist. I read Naomi Klein's book about Doppelganger.
Which great book. Another great book.
She'd already been kind of drifting that way, because she was like, I don't remember, she mentioned something in like the Occupy Wall Street movement where, you know, she was like taking shots at the Occupy people and whatnot. But anyway, like she just never came back. And now she's a constant guest on,
News and
well, like the one of the worst podcasts too. Like it's not Alex Jones, but it's like one of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're just like, fuck, man, you
right.
You ran so far away from your original principles.
Well, and the point is outrage, right?
Yeah.
So outrage and embarrassment, and use those to kind of fracture people. And so you see on these big media sources that's a lot of what's happening is this constant outrage. And then, of course, we know now that the little anger emoji drives more and more engagement by the algorithm. So if you post something that people get pissed off at, then it makes them more money.
Yeah.
So there's a financial, and it's the same thing. You get addicted to news. That's why these people who sit there and they watch Fox News or MSNBC or CNN or whatever all day long.
Yeah.
They're just getting a constant barrage of emotional.
2 minutes hate.
Yeah, 2 minutes hate. It's exactly what they do. And then, you know, hate week is like during the election cycle when all we do is at the other party, right? And this is not to say that, like, you know, I mean, I say all this, but of course, like, objectively speaking, like, there is certainly worse things that one side of this aisle does than the other, like, especially with, like, derailing democratic systems and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not to say that this is like both sidism's argument, but it is important to look at our own sources and our own kind of ideas and think, how are they perpetuating this system? And by making this kind of like MSNBC and Fox News are kind of like they're really doing the same thing.
Yeah, and
from a different perspective.
I wasn't trying to say explicitly that the Democratic Party is consciously trying to prop up the Republican Party. I think what I mean by that is that that's functionally what they are doing.
Yeah.
And that they're...
especially right now.
Yeah, that their efforts have been captured by the system to reinforce conservative ideology and politics by offering a milquetoast counterpoint to that would never effectuate anything in the first place, really substantial. Like, you might get small gains under a Democratic leadership, but the Supreme Court has been chipping away at our rights for decades now. Like,
and you only really have one progressive court in history, right? We were talking about this the other day.
Exactly. The Warren Court.
Yeah, the Warren Court, and every other Supreme Court is essentially very
always
conservative.
been very conservative. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. They're the ones who signed off on the concentration camps for Japanese people during World War II. They're the ones who signed off on all the slave policies prior to that. They're the ones that signed off on Jim Crow. I mean, everything. Yeah.
I mean, Plessy versus Ferguson is a great example,
exactly.
right?
So yeah, no, it's a conservative system that positions itself as like a bastion of freedom and liberty when that has never been the case. When the Irish immigrated here initially in the 19th century, they were treated as equivalent to free black people, and it was only after they started to collaborate in movements to liberate themselves that the system deigned to offer Irish people like whiteness privilege.
They were called all through the 19th century. They were called Negroes turned inside out.
Yes,
which
exactly.
tells you a lot about and you actually can find periodicals with these.
There's another great book, How the Irish Became White, that explains that.
Yeah.
I wanted to, before we sign off here, I wanted to get into, there's one passage that I like made a note with a page number in it to discuss. Is like the 4 tenets of the ruling system. And so here we go. Here's a little passage here. But the problems of perpetuating a hierarchical society go deeper than this. There are only 4 ways in which a ruling group can fall from power. Either it is conquered from without, or it governs so inefficiently that the masses are stirred to revolt, or it allows a strong and discontented middle group to come into being, or it loses its own self-confidence and willingness to govern, I should say. These causes do not operate singly. As a rule, all 4 of them are present at some degree, and a ruling class which could guard against all of them would remain in power perpetually. That is what the party has figured out in 1984. And I do think that at this moment in time, it seems like they have figured it out in reality too.
Yeah.
The middle
Something
group
close.
has been captured by anger politics and is so disorganized by the algorithm. I would say, I think it's a lot of it is social media. I think social media is a great distraction, but it is also a great...
Puppies and outrage.
Yes, puppies and outrage. That's what exists there.
We need a t-shirt.
I go there for the
and
puppies. I get the outrage.
That's right. I go
You
there. Yeah. Yeah, we need a t-shirt or a mug like that. Puppies and outrage.
Yeah. I don't know how you derail it besides like having open revolt. And since we've equipped our police with military grade weaponry in every major city, to the point where they're so well funded for how many of them there are that I don't know what we could do to fight against them. I think they literally do have to create the own seed of their destruction.
Yeah. And in some ways, I think they are. Like, the George Floyd was kind of like...
They effectively countered that, though. They made wokeness lame.
That's true.
And they used, like, the weapons that they had acquired through... I feel like John Oliver has a great... description of how they got military grade weaponry over the past like 25 years.
Right.
When I was a kid, cops used to just look like what you would think of as a stereotypical police officer with like the flat pointy, like the hat with the points on it. You know what I'm talking about? It's got flat, and they would walk and they would have like a nightstick and some pepper spray and a gun, but like a 6-shooter or something like that, and just like walk around, like saying hi, folks. That's probably not true. I'm probably thinking of Mayberry or something like that. But that was my impression of cops back then. And now it's literally a guy with like a helmet where he has a visor where you can't see his face. He's got armor on. He's got like
military
bulletproof armor on.
Yeah, Kevlar vest.
Kevlar vest. He's got a fucking shield.
Yeah.
And like a fucking submachine gun or something like that. He's just like, he is ready to go. He looks like he's ready to fight Thanos, not like people on the streets.
Have a shield.
Yeah, he's like a shield guy for sure. Yeah.
One final thing I wanted to bring up too is one key to this book was the end of privacy.
Yes, absolutely.
That was, if you're going to have total control, ending privacy is the key, according to George Orwell.
And the Supreme Court has effectively done that.
Yeah, the Supreme Court.
It's not enshrined in law anymore. No, privacy.
No, it's not. And it's like I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about how we kind of, and people do in some documentaries and various other places, talking about how privacy came to an end. But I think that's the point, is they have these telescreens in 1984. You never can have any privacy whatsoever.
Because your friend is probably in the thought police. Your child is definitely a spy in the spies. Right. And that's everybody. Even your partner is being controlled by the state because they are afraid to have an emotional connection with you.
Right. So the communities are fractured. Everything is hyper individualistic, and there's no privacy, which sounds disturbingly like what we're facing.
Absolutely. As the technology to monitor us was increasing in the 90s and aughts and 2010s, the Supreme Court was rolling back privacy protections. They were signaling in their either the dissents or their concurrences or their actual opinions that you did not have a right to privacy. And that was obviously the conservative judges that were positing that. But the liberals, like every liberal everywhere, were saying like, I don't agree, but not offering up a defense.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I chose this particular book for our first episode, because it just seems so deeply relevant to the things that we're facing right now. And you said, I've never read V for Vendetta. I did see the film.
You should read it, man. It's sick as hell. Like, it's Alan Moore's best work by far, in my opinion. It's also it's funny that he and his collaborator David Lloyd started publishing it in 1983. I feel like it was
not on accident.
Not on accident. Yes.
Yeah, because like you say, it's a kind of an answer to 1984.
Yeah. What do you do? What actions do you take? And the character of V is intentionally like there's no he's ideas. He's basically like Big Brother, but he's the answer to Big Brother. He's a collection of ideas that are about like embracing love, an appreciation of art, the way mankind expresses love for the world, and direct action.
Right.
And I think that is what we need. And I know a lot of people in the queer community. I'm a member of the queer community, but we've been saying that like small acts of love are resistance.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great place to start.
Right.
I don't think that is going to solve anything.
Yeah.
But I think it can help give people courage.
Yeah.
Radicalize them.
Yeah.
Against the current panopticon that we live in. We talked about that before.
Yeah, it's Foucault who really popularized this idea. It comes from Jeremy Bethan back in the 19th century, but it's the idea that you set up systems of power where people surveil each other, and then also you don't know if you're being surveilled or not. That's the idea.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
That's the whole point. And
you operate like you are, even though you probably aren't.
Right, and which like your search engine just like mentioned earlier,
whether
how to destroy a Tesla or whatever charging station. Like you being afraid is an example of the panopticon because you're not sure if anyone is watching.
Exactly.
And you'll actually more likely to behave if you think someone might be watching than if you know for a fact someone is watching.
Interesting. Why is that?
I think it's because if you know someone is watching, there are subtle ways you can resist. Even when someone is watching, versus if you don't know, then you're in a constant state of anxiety and you're spending all this extra energy trying to decide if someone is watching.
That is exactly what I experienced. Yeah.
Like, because think about it this way,
doing it.
you know, if you know someone is oppressing you and it's very clear and it's an obvious source, you're much more likely to give them that middle finger.
Yes, like the proles do.
Like the proles do, right? Versus if you don't know if someone is watching or not, you don't know who to give the middle finger.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly who is watching, what you're doing, or why, or whatnot.
Right.
So that is why, like, you know, I think that's why, like, this book is just so effective at really pointing out all of these things in our current system, and these are exactly the things that Orwell was warning us about. I don't think it is hopeless. I think there are lots of little things you can do: collective organization, unionization,
like literally, God, I feel so cliche to say this. Getting involved in local politics is the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
Go to those city council meetings and be a voice of actual reason.
Right.
Instead of reactionary, conservatism.
Yeah. Checking your outrage. That's something we all have to do every day. Even when there's something objectively outrageous, like this poor man getting deported and thrown into prison and being administrative error.
Yes.
There's every reason to be outraged. But the question is your outrage going to spawn you towards some sort of change? Is it going to be useful, or are you going to sit there and lay up all night torturing yourself, keeping yourself from getting the very important rest you need? So what is your outrage doing?
Don't be like Selena Gomez in the sense that, like, she recorded that Instagram live video where she was just like so upset about all of the changes and the deportations that were happening because they were directly affecting her community.
Right.
And what she did is she went online and like got very upset about it, and people just mocked her for it.
Right.
She's a billionaire. She could actually probably do something.
Right.
But she was so captured by her frustration and her anger that she did the least effectual thing possible instead of something I'm assuming very effective. Like, she could, with $1 billion, probably do something. I don't know what that something is because I don't have $1 billion.
Yeah,
I don't have access.
We're both poor.
We're both quite poor. I work in a kitchen and he teaches for a living. Like,
yeah.
But she, and then she kind of made herself a laughingstock. Doesn't help that she was also in a very embarrassing movie that was nominated for an absurd amount of Oscars.
Yeah.
And then didn't do a very good job being in that movie. But I love Selena Gomez. This is I'm not shitting on her. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
That's not what you need to do.
Posting about your outrage isn't really all that useful.
No.
And, you know, there was this sense for a long time, and I kind of bought into it, that creating more awareness around stuff helps. And that's true to a point. When something is very publicly discussed, you weighing in with your particular viewpoint probably isn't all that useful.
No, I don't think that jumping on a bandwagon of discussion has ever helped anything, really. Like, I think that there are a lot of people out there that are aware of what's happening right now, to varying degrees, obviously,
Right.
but like, it's fairly clear that the Democratic Party is,
Flailing,
I would say, ineffectual to the point of like it's embarrassing.
like a drowning person.
They're not like a drowning person. They're like a person that like dove headfirst into some quicksand and then was like, guys, I'm trapped in quicksand. Help me.
Yeah.
Send me $20 to get out of this quicksand today, which is just, it's frustrating, it's embarrassing, and it's not helping anything.
Right.
Voting Democratic is probably actually not going to do anything, which is wild to think about.
Right.
Unless you're doing it on a local level. Unless
Right.
you're like,
Local politics are so important.
that's how
The
the
most
Republicans
important.
have captured
Piece by piece.
piece by piece, basically packing all the courts up and down the dockets. But yeah, that's the thing you should be doing. You should be getting out. You should be like talking to representatives in person.
Organizing
community power. That's
a lot of my subject of my own graduate research, was looking at how a social justice theater troupe can change the conversation in Denver.
fucking love that.
So, you know, just using
I actually
community
have someone I
members on
want to put you in
stage.
touch with.
Yeah, yes, for sure. So yeah, like the Romero Theater Troupe, and I did a film, if you're curious, Unbound, the story of the Romero Theater Troupe.
Actually, that's where I met you.
It's on. Yeah, that is
I had a
true.
screening of
You
that.
did. Yeah, your wife brought you to the screening, because her wife, his wife and I, we worked together in anthropology departments and stuff, and we co-wrote a book together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we met. But yeah, like looking at small community actions and social organization and building connections, even with people you don't agree with. Especially. And if you think that they're too hateful to talk to, they just hate like the queer or black or whatever community, like that's actually the more important person to talk to.
Most important person.
You have to, if you can build trust in a relationship over time with those individuals, you are so much more likely to get them to change their mind. And we cannot do we cannot do social change by getting on two different sides.
Right.
That just leads to things like civil war and sectarian violence and various other things. Like I keep hearing people calling for like assassinations of leaders and various other things. It's like that just creates more violence.
Yeah.
We have to remove their power piece by piece, conversation by conversation. You know, it's like the civil rights activist Anne Braden once said, everyone gets their brick to put in the cathedral, okay? Everyone gets one stone. That's all you get is one stone. You can't make the whole cathedral by yourself. It's day by day, conversation by conversation. The whole point of this is the fracturing of the community, fracturing of the sense of truth, fracturing, everything about what it means to be human. So making art is resistance, loving people, being kind to people, building community, supporting people even when you don't necessarily support their ideas.
Right.
Those are all really important and powerful things. And that's why I think, literature is so powerful.
Absolutely.
That's why I say over and over again, stories are going to save the world. We have to tell better stories.
Yes.
Those kinds of things.
Yes. So. Not second screen stories, first screen stories, big screen stories.
Absolutely.
So much of the media we watch right now is meant to be consumed on a second screen that you're not fully paying attention to.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what they described in 1984.
Right.
That's what the news media is.
That's what the news media is. So, any final thoughts?
I think it's a shame how little we've been talking about 1984 in our society right now, considering that we are walking right into that. I hope that this starts a conversation about that with at least some people.
Yeah, if anyone watches.
I want to thank you so much for getting me to read the book, because it was fantastic. It was illuminating. It was also scary, but I think in a way that we need to embrace right now, you know?
Yeah.
Because things are kind of scary, and that should spur us into action.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be back another time with another book. We haven't decided what book we're going to read next.
Yeah.
We have a couple of ideas, but we'll be back, and we're going to kind of... I will always be... it looks like we got a hello. We don't have a question.
Okay.
We got a hello in the comments. I will occasionally monitor the comments, and we'll do our best to answer. I'll reach out to Matt if we have a specific question.
Okay.
It's possible that if the question seems relevant enough, we can get on again for like a little short.
Sure.
And just record a quick answer or something, or our thoughts on something. So please feel free to comment if you didn't get a chance to watch this live. I know this is now approaching an hour and 20 minutes. I know we're a little long-winded, but I mean, these books have deep ideas.
I think it was a worthy amount of time to discuss this book.
Yeah, I think so too. So thanks for everyone who watched, and hello, is it Fitz?
Yeah, it's Fitz.
Yeah, hello Fitz. Hello Fitz. And we're going to sign off here, and we'll talk about more books in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Sign off yet.
I think we have to let it... I'm going to let it go for a second because of the time delay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and some people might see this time delay discussion. But
that happens.
That's okay.
I always enjoy those when
yes.
I'm watching a podcast.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, what book do you think we should read next?
I was thinking maybe it should be V.
Maybe we should do V for Vendetta.
Yeah,
now you
it's
got
a good one.
Now you got, because I haven't read that one.
Yeah.
So
a little switcheroo.
Yeah, a little switcheroo. Switcheroo. So.
I was also... People kept talking about Brave New World in conversation with it because it's apparently kind of like a mirror version.
It is a mirror version. I read that one in my early 20s as well. It's about using pleasure for social control and distraction.
I don't think that's quite as relevant. Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
It is, though. Like streaming.
Streaming, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't even get to talk about how streaming is exactly the model of collective oligarchy, like the mechanism of collective oligarchy that they